So I'm Crazy Kevin here, and I'm here with UFC bantamweight Garrett Armfield. Garrett, how we doing, man?
Doing great, man. Thank you for having me on, Kevin. Appreciate it.
No problem. So Garrett, you recently just fought two-time winner Bracketona, and I know that's a big feather in your cap. What do you think, confidence-wise, that gives you going into your future fight?
Um, now I really believe that I can beat anybody in the world, especially like in the striking department. I do have a couple holes in areas I'm working on every single day, but it just like cemented the fact that I'm like staying in the UFC. Um, on my way up throughout the regional scene, like from like I had a lot of guys I looked up to, like Gilbert Burns and all of them, and they would always tell me that getting to the UFC was easy, staying in is hard. And so, which I thought it was incredibly hard to get to the UFC, and then but now I'm able to stay in, and it makes my job way easier and way less pressure.
Right. Now you mentioned like Gilbert Burns was talking to you. Is there any fighters that when you started training that were kind of taking you under your wing when you first started training?
Uh, Living down in Florida, because I don't live in Florida anymore. Um, I would say like Soriano really took me under his wing, and taught me a lot about how fighting's a business and how I need to handle myself um in and out of the cage, and the right moves I need to do and how it has to be in my best interest. And so I'd say Sean Soriano is one man. He was a two-time UFC veteran. I think he fought 5 times for the UFC, but he was in the UFC two separate stints. So he's been a guy that's been through the game, been through like the ups and the downs, and so he's a hell of a coach too. But unfortunately, I don't train there anymore. I still keep up with them and talk to them all the time. But now I'm up in Kansas City, which you probably know.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, speaking of Kansas City, what was your thoughts about the Super Bowl this year?
Oh, that was I don't really watch football, but I did watch it this time, and it was an interesting game. It was cool. Yeah, it was good. I mean, I'm not the biggest football fan. Honestly, I started watching, which I didn't grow up doing soccer either. I just started watching soccer like within the past like 6 months, and it's actually a cool ass. It's a really cool sport, especially to attend live.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, I know I was watching a previous podcast with you. As a kid, I saw you mentioned you were doing something, I believe it was like USA Karate or something like that. How long were you in that? And, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I grew up doing karate. I started when I was like 4 years old in Eureka, Missouri, and it was a little karate school that was owned by um like regional kickboxers that like a couple of them were professional, but this was like they're all in their 50s and stuff, and so they weren't actively competing, but they had a kickboxing class that they ran Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and it was mostly just like 10-year-olds that did it. But that was my brother's age group. I was a little bit younger than him, so I was like 6 7 years old, and I started kickboxing with them, just doing like pads and all that stuff. um, and so then I guess ever since then, since I was like 6 years old, I've done kickboxing, but the karate started when I was like 4 years old. Um, but that was something that I did karate from ages 4 to 18. And then so it was like a huge part of my life. And we would spend like my family, that was like kind of like our family thing we did together. We all did it. And so like that was our family time as well. And so I was probably up at the karate studio at least like 4 nights a week growing up for, like 16 or 10 years of my life or whatever I was there.
Now, when it comes to karate, were you doing any sort of teaching? And then, if you were doing any sort of teaching, what belt level did you end up, I guess, stopping when you were doing karate?
I was a black belt in karate. I think I got my black belt at like 15 or something. I'd been doing it so long. And I never really taught. I mean, we once you became a black belt at that school, you automatically became like one of the instructors as well. Like you would help run class because like you had been there for at least like 7 years to get your black belt through him at least. The other karate schools are different. This was actually a really traditional, like it was hard to get your black belt type of karate school. Like we would go up on the weekends to test for our next belt, and it would be like a 12, you would have to be at the karate studio for like 10 to 12 hours, especially testing for your black belt. And like 70 hours is doing like katas and like over and over again. So it's like a lot of mental strength that would go into it. Nowadays karate is like more of a very money oriented business now, so it's I don't think it has the same effect. I because I do use a lot of movement from karate that I picked up as a kid, and I think I'm very effective with it. But I think if you take somebody that just does traditional karate modern, I think they would just get smashed in an MMA fight. But yeah, so and then so I was a black belt. And then I help teach kids jujitsu sometimes. I used to do it more frequently, but I don't really coach or teach anything other than helping people out at Marathon MMA.
No, that's awesome. Now for your either your black belt test or any of your belt tests that you might have had maybe as a kid or as you got older, did you have any sort of like board breaking or any sort of things you had to break? I guess as a kid growing up.
Ranking,
Board breaking.
board breaking. Yeah, we did like board breaking too. Um, yeah, they would do like we would actually it'd be pretty cool. They would have two of like the big like we had two guys that were firefighters growing up that were they're like fire chiefs that did karate as well or whatever. It was like a big community in Eureka. But they would like have two people, those two big guys, in front next to each other, and then they would have a smaller guy get on top of them and make like a little pyramid and then hold the karate board up. So then you'd do like jump flying side kicks and like kick the board, which is really freaking cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, the only reason I asked is because since I've been doing Taekwondo my whole life, and when I used to do some of the breaks on my tests, like one thing we had to do was like punch a clay pot. So I didn't know if you had any kind of crazy stories like that as you were kind of growing up
Oh
as a
no,
kid.
I mean it was nothing too crazy, I guess, from my point of view. Maybe from like the average person, like a non fighter or anything like that. They're probably it's pretty interesting that I spend so much time at the karate school. But yeah.
Now, when it comes to fighting, I guess as a young fighter, what do you have as recommendations for martial art to kind of get into when it comes to striking and on the ground?
Wait, what'd you say?
For recommendations for young fighters that are coming up, what would you recommend for stand up
Yeah,
and
it's called the 10,000 hour rule. So it's pretty much like um you got to become an expert in something, you got to put 10,000 hours in. And so I'll just say volume of training just has to become your life. Like I know it's a lot to ask for somebody that's like 18 years old just starting out fighting, but like I was 18 years old and I was going to school, working, doing all that stuff, but I was at the gym 6 days a week and never made an excuse not to be there. I was always there. I was just obsessed with it. But pretty much that, just like constantly always being there. I think that's when I made my biggest jump in skill was when I started going twice a day, 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Like 4 days a week, and then for the tour days. Uh, when I was like 19, 20 years old, I feel like that's where I made a lot of advancement in my skill, and just like it's like a long term investment. Like I had no clue it would take me damn near like 8 years to start making money from fighting, but it did. So um, it's paying off.
yeah, no doubt. Now I saw on the amateur scene you had about 7 fights before you went into the pro scene. What was kind of your mindset like as an amateur fighter to go into the pro scene? Like, why did you take 7 fights? I know there was a lot of fighters that maybe take a little bit less before they go in the pro scene. Why 7 fights before you went on the pro scene?
Yeah, I think like the thing was maybe like going into it, the only thing I would change was that like I put too much pressure and too much emphasis on amateur fights. And like I would get stressed out about it. So as like a young fighter that is competing amateurly, you should just have fun with it. Don't care about wins and losses. Just care about like gaining experience and fighting often and like, racking up that experience. Yeah, and just there should be no pressure. Because I'm gonna be honest, nobody cares if you like being winning an amateur title is huge. It's fun, it's great, especially for like yourself. But the next day, nobody even cares that you won the title. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Now I was gonna say too. There's a couple fighters we've interviewed recently, and they always mention how important that O is. Like when you first start and you're a pro fighter, is that another thing that might have stressed you out? Like being an amateur fighter, like making sure you definitely had the skills to make sure you were gonna stay undefeated as long as possible.
Oh, like being undefeated. I mean, yeah, it does help a lot. Like if like look at Elias Poirier already he's only we've had almost the same amount of professional fights, but he's a champion. So the O does help, but like it's not it can't you can't make that like a whole thing. Like I was 5-2 when I started my professional career. Um and so yeah, it just is what it is. Um because like and a loss is an experience too. Like, you know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, when you come to fighting and like after a fight, when it comes to a win or a loss, how do you kind of regroup to make yourself better after a win or a loss?
I kind of put that into like nothing changes whenever you have a fight coming up or not, other than you just do more cardio. But I kind of just I put that on my coaches because that's what I paid. But that's why we work together, so he can help me improve stuff. So if after a loss or win, I will let my coach, who has a way better understanding of fighting than I do, um, kind of like dissect everything and kind of tell me what I need to work on.
Recently, you're looking for a fight. You've mentioned it on Twitter or X now, and you also mentioned it on Instagram. I know, me personally, I commented Adrian Yanez, and you said that would be a fun fight. Is there anybody else you might have had like in mind other than that, or maybe saw some other fun comments?
Brady Heinstein, for sure. Him. The guy that fought the Basharat and beat him last night, Sahab. Can't remember his name. He just fought and won last night. Him and the dude that won the flying knee knockout. I would be cool fighting him too. Like he's good, but I really believe that I am the best striker in the bantamweight. Um, I really believe I can compete with the best. So I want to fight the best. And if there's a guy that's got a big name now because he just landed a flying knee knockout, I wanna go fight that guy. I'm not gonna shy away from anybody. I'm not gonna go out there and pick fights. You want to give me the toughest fights, I'll take the toughest fights. So those guys, but Brady Heinstein would be a great opponent for St. Louis.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds like a fun matchup. That's a matchup I didn't even think about. And speaking of that, I thought you mentioned you're maybe a fight away before re-upping and maybe getting a new contract with the UFC. So I'm sure you're maybe looking for a fun matchup to maybe try and get a 50K bonus on top of maybe a nice contract as well too.
Yeah, right.
Now, on top of that too, when it comes to your fighting, for someone that hasn't maybe watched your fights, how would you describe your fighting style to somebody?
My fighting style is striking heavy, um, and very boxing oriented. So like I'll just say that like I have a boxer style. Um, yeah, I'm a really fun, exciting fighter to watch. And I feel like, if you are, then I feel like you should be able to say that. But like I know my fights are way more exciting than the other fights I watch. And so yeah, I say exciting come forward style. That's aggressive. Like I'm aggressive. So
Now, how long do you think it would take you to maybe crack the rankings or maybe even reach the title one day?
I think the rankings are probably like 4 fights away. I'd say if I go 4-0 my next 4 fights and then puts me 6-0 in the bantamweight division, I think I would get the top 15 at that point.
Now, I know you are big into studying your opponents on like Tapology, and I was actually personally looking at yours. And I know personally you were fighting a guy like Brad Katona, and when you beat him, I was actually looking at the fan votings, and only 9% of fans voted for you, and then 91 was on Katona. And then on top of that, you were also an underdog. Do you happen to ever look at the betting lines and maybe get like a little bit more confident, or maybe a little bit more like less pressure now that you're like an underdog going into that fight?
Um, honestly, now that I kind of like I've been on both sides of it, being the favorite and underdog, and I do watch them, and like, well, I think it's really interesting to see like what the community thinks and stuff. Um, but like, it doesn't ever like affect me performance wise or mentally. Like, I don't really put too much emphasis on it. A lot of people put a lot of weight on that stuff. It's just like another, I don't know. It's like the million of prediction YouTube shows out there that like you'll listen to and hear what they say, and some people have some cool things to say. So, I do like to look into that stuff. So, yeah.
Now, one thing I also thought was interesting about you, I heard from another podcast that you said that you spar about 50 to 55 live rounds in the gym. Is that something you're still staying consistent with? And is that like an average for normal fighters, or is that a little bit more?
No, it's like in peak of camp for like 2 or 3 weeks. We do that. I do that many. Usually I'm sticking to like 45 rounds, live rounds when I'm in camp. Because Trey has everything that he wants us to do, my head coach. So yeah, it just, like 10 rounds a day, pretty much 5 in the morning, 5 at night, and it's working out for the team. So I'm gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, I know you're a big time traveler too. What is maybe your favorite fight place that you've traveled to so far?
Singapore for sure. That was cool. Because Canada just felt like America, but it was cool. But Singapore was awesome.
What was so cool about Singapore that kind of stood out?
It being in Asia.
Now, one last thing I have for you before we wrap it up here. Like I mentioned, I'm a Taekwondo practitioner myself. Been doing it for about 20 years, and I've been teaching for about 6. I have about 150 students, and with my school, I was just maybe asking, since you've been at the karate school yourself for so long, what advice do you have for them to kind of keep going and to strive to keep earning their belts and to keep getting better every day?
Yeah, just be you just gotta do it for yourself. It's just like you got if you want to set a goal, you have to if you set a goal, you have to finish it or at least attempt to meet it. They shouldn't be called goals, they should be called targets because like you're not gonna miss. So that's probably what I would say is that like instead of calling it a goal, call it a target. Like my target's to get my black belt. Um, you know, then it's like then I'm actively if it's a goal, it's like, oh, I hope I hit that. It's my goal. But if it's a target, I feel like it's more like I'm gonna hit that. So it's just like the mindset, just gotta be resilient.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, all good stuff. Garrett, before I let you go here, is there any last thing you'd like to promote and maybe last message for the fans that are going to be watching this?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I had a good time. Just like reach out to my social medias, Armfield 135 on X, and then Garrett Armfield 135 on Instagram. But yeah, stay tuned for fight news, and hopefully I'll know within the next month.
That sounds awesome, man. And thank you so much for coming on. You're a real cool
And
dude.
yeah, thanks for having me, my man.
I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully maybe we can talk to you again. And good luck for your fights in the future. And we're looking forward to seeing your career.
Yeah, thank you, man. Have a good day.
All right, man. Have a good day. Have a good night. See you later. Bye bye.
You too.
「終わって終わらない焦燥狂って